Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: the devastation of Gaza was inevitable. Russia's dangerous new friends. Why America can't have it all. Is Biden's Gaza policy alienating black voters? Chaos in Senegal after election delay. The devastation of Gaza was inevitable. Foreign policy. The recent conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza has led to significant death and destruction. This article argues that the high civilian casualties and damage to infrastructure are a result of the urban environment in which the conflict took place. The article compares the situation in Gaza to previous battles against the Islamic State in Mosul and Raqqa, where similar destruction occurred. The urban environment provides advantages to the defending force, making it difficult for the attacker to advance without causing significant damage. Additionally, Hamas's use of tunnels and underground bunkers further complicates the situation, as these structures are often hidden within civilian areas, resulting in collateral damage when targeted by Israeli airstrikes. The article also notes that Hamas strategically places civilians in harm's way, using them as human shields and ammunition in an information war. The article concludes by suggesting that future wars are likely to involve significant destruction in urban areas as cities continue to grow in size and density. Russia's dangerous new friends. Foreign affairs. Russia has been deepening its ties with the Axis of Resistance, a network of Iranian partners and proxies that includes Hamas, Hezbollah, the Yemeni Houthis, and Iraqi and Syrian militias. This relationship poses a significant threat to the United States and its allies in the region. Russia has been providing military aid, including drones and anti-ship missiles, to these groups, as well as diplomatic and rhetorical support. Moscow's cooperation with the Axis's anti-American activism will likely continue to deepen, as both parties share a common goal of weakening the United States and its allies. To counter this influence, the United States must make efforts to end the war in Gaza, calm tensions throughout the Middle East, and push third parties, particularly its Arab allies, to undercut the partnership between Russia and the Axis of Resistance. Washington should also engage in serious diplomatic efforts to settle the region's conflicts and strengthen the formal state structures of countries where Axis groups operate. Additionally, the United States should encourage Gulf countries, which value economic partnerships with Russia, to pressure Moscow to dial down its assistance to pro-Iran groups. Addressing the partnership between Russia and the Axis of Resistance is crucial for the United States, as Russia's invasion of Ukraine and its support for the Axis are part of its broader campaign to weaken the existing international order and undermine U.S. dominance. These two entities view each other as comrades in arms in this effort, and disrupting their cooperation is essential for Washington's strategic interests. Why America can't have it all. Foreign affairs. The Biden administration's plan to prioritize managing competition with China and tackling transnational threats has fallen apart as the United States finds itself embroiled in multiple conflicts in Europe and the Middle East. The administration hoped to keep certain regions quiet while focusing on what it deemed most important, but this wishful thinking has proven naive. The United States' pursuit of global primacy and reluctance to disentangle itself from certain regions has led to a precarious situation, with deteriorating relations with China and Russia raising the prospect of a major power conflict. The options for the United States are stark: it can selectively retrench and control costs and risks, or it can continue with global primacy and navigate from one crisis to another. The Biden administration has attempted to prioritize certain regions while remaining the primary security actor in those places, but this approach has been unsuccessful. The administration's efforts to mollify rivals through diplomacy and encourage allies to step up have not led to significant progress. The Biden administration has now turned to building connective tissue between U.S. allies in Europe and Asia as a fallback strategy. However, this approach is unlikely to reduce overall costs and risks for the United States. Allies would need to assume responsibilities and develop capabilities that replace those of the United States and outpace the threats from China and Russia, which does not seem to be happening. The Biden administration must recognize that burden sharing is not a substitute for burden shifting. To act strategically and set priorities according to its interests, the United States must pull back from regions that matter less. It should differentiate among regions and establish clear divisions of labor between itself and its security partners. This means disentangling the United States from the Middle East, shifting the European defense burden to European allies, and establishing competitive coexistence with China while preventing a bid for regional hegemony. A new foreign policy consensus is necessary to sustain a coherent strategy and maintain credible commitments. Is Biden's Gaza policy alienating black voters? Foreign policy. President Joe Biden's reluctance to call for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war is causing more and more black voters to question their support for the president. This is a significant shift, as for decades, addressing black voters' concerns with racial and economic domestic issues was enough to secure their vote for the Democratic Party. However, Biden's handling of the conflict in the Middle East is leading to growing discontentment among black voters. More than 1,000 black pastors have called for an end to Israel's offensive operations in Gaza, and polling shows that black voters' approval rating for Biden has dipped nearly 20 percentage points in recent months. The dip in enthusiasm for Biden is partly due to a feeling of black Palestinian solidarity among some disaffected black voters, as well as a limited appetite for further U.S. involvement in the Middle East. Additionally, the deaths of 3 black service members in a drone attack near the Syria-Jordan border have raised questions about Biden's Middle East policy and its impact on the black community. As election season approaches, Biden's appearances at black community events will not be enough to secure the black vote if the humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to worsen. Chaos in Senegal after election delay. Foreign policy. Nigerian President Bola Tinubu has postponed a meeting with Senegalese President Macky Sall in which he was expected to call for a reversal of Sall's 10-month presidential election delay. Instead, a delegation headed by the Speaker of the ECOWAS Parliament, Sidi Mohamed Tunis, was sent. At least 3 people have been killed in weekend protests against the decision to postpone the election, and fresh protests planned for Tuesday were postponed after the government banned them and cut mobile internet access. West African leaders called on Senegal to urgently restore the electoral calendar. The reputation of regional blocs such as the ECOWAS and the African Union has been significantly damaged over their failure to deal with democratic backsliding. In December, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger announced they were quitting the now 12-member bloc. The bloc, which has called on Senegal to urgently restore the electoral calendar, has little leverage at a time when 3 nations led by military governments are already defying its demands. Last week, a Nigerian retired brigadier general criticized ECOWAS and argued that the bloc does not provide any humanitarian services to the African public. Ivory Coast beat Nigeria 2-1 to win its 3rd Africa Cup of Nations, AFCON, on Sunday. The Ivory Coast team lost 2 out of its 3 group stage matches and sacked its French coach mid-tournament after a 4-0 defeat by Equatorial Guinea. This is the 3rd consecutive AFCON tournament in which an African coach has led a team to victory. Displaced Palestinians leave one of Gaza's main hospitals after weeks of being isolated by fighting. Associated Press. Palestinians have started evacuating the main hospital in the southern Gaza town of Khan Yunis, as the war between Israel and Hamas continues to devastate the health sector in Gaza. Less than half of Gaza's hospitals are partially functioning, and many have been targeted by Israeli airstrikes. The Israeli military has opened a secure route for civilians to leave the hospital, but medics and patients can remain inside. The war has so far killed at least 28,576 Palestinians, including over 100 in the past 24 hours, and has displaced around 80% of Gaza's population. Biden's grand bargain to remake the Middle East. Foreign policy. The Biden administration is working on a grand bargain that would link Israel and Saudi Arabia's rapprochement to significant progress towards Palestinian statehood, according to a number of analysts and former U.S. officials. The plan builds on efforts to strike a U.S.-Saudi defense pact, which Riyadh has prioritized. Saudi Arabia would establish diplomatic relations with Israel, and all parties would take irreversible steps towards Palestinian statehood. The proposal is set to be announced in spring. However, the plan faces significant hurdles, with some doubting that it can be achieved. Israeli minister blocks flour from reaching UNRWA in Gaza. New York Times. The Israeli Finance Ministry has blocked food deliveries to Gaza, which were intended for the UN Agency for Palestinians, UNRWA. The finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, stated that he issued a directive to prevent the transfer of flour shipments to UNRWA, citing allegations that some of its employees were affiliated with Hamas. As a result, around 1,050 containers of food, enough to feed 1.1 million Gazans for a month, have been held up at the Israeli port of Ashdod. UNRWA has enough supplies to feed Gazans for 3 months, as it has rerouted the food through Egypt instead of Israel. Smotrich said that an alternative aid distribution mechanism would be found that would not reach Hamas. Israeli strikes on Lebanon kill 4 including 2 kids, as regional tensions soar. South China Morning Post. Israeli fighter jets have launched a series of strikes in Lebanon, raising fears of war between the 2 countries. The Israeli military did not provide any further details about the strikes, but Lebanese media reported air raids on several southern villages, resulting in the deaths of at least 4 civilians. The strikes came after fire from Lebanon wounded several people in northern Israel. The Lebanese militant group, Hezbollah, has been engaged in near-daily fire with Israeli troops since the outbreak of the Gaza war over 4 months ago. Tensions have been rising and fears of a full-blown conflict between Israel and Hezbollah have been growing. Israel launches extensive strikes on Lebanon. BBC. Israel has launched a series of attacks on Lebanon in response to a rocket attack on northern Israel. The attack from Lebanon hit the Safed area and was aimed at the Israeli military's northern command center. Lebanese media reported that villages had been hit and buildings were on fire. Hezbollah, a Shia Muslim organization, is thought to have carried out the attack but has not claimed responsibility. The two sides have been exchanging fire since the attacks by Hamas on October 7. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the six-dimensional world. It's been an eventful week in global affairs, so let's dive right into the analysis. First, we have the devastating situation in Gaza, where the recent conflict between Israel and Hamas has resulted in significant death and destruction. The urban environment in which the conflict took place has played a crucial role in the high civilian casualties and damage to infrastructure. Similar destruction has been seen in battles against the Islamic State in cities like Mosul and Raqqa. The dense urban environment provides advantages to the defending force, making it difficult for the attacker to advance without causing significant damage. Hamas's use of tunnels and underground bunkers further complicates the situation, as they are often hidden within civilian areas, resulting in collateral damage when targeted by Israeli airstrikes. It's a tragic situation that highlights the challenges of warfare in urban areas. Next, we turn to Russia's dangerous new friends. Russia has been deepening its ties with the Axis of Resistance, a network of Iranian partners and proxies that includes Hamas, Hezbollah, and other groups. This relationship poses a significant threat to the United States and its allies in the region. Russia has been providing military aid and diplomatic support to these groups, as both parties share a common goal of weakening the United States and its allies. To counter this influence, the United States must make efforts to end the war in Gaza, calm tensions in the Middle East, and push its Arab allies to undercut the partnership between Russia and the Axis of Resistance. It's a delicate balancing act in a complex geopolitical landscape. Moving on, we have the Biden administration's struggle to prioritize its foreign policy objectives. The administration's plan to focus on managing competition with China and tackling transnational threats has fallen apart as the United States finds itself embroiled in multiple conflicts in Europe and the Middle East. The pursuit of global primacy and reluctance to disentangle from certain regions has led to a precarious situation, with deteriorating relations with China and Russia raising the prospect of a major power conflict. The United States must make some tough choices, selectively retrench and control costs and risks, or continue with global primacy and navigate from one crisis to another. A coherent strategy and new foreign policy consensus are necessary to sustain U.S. interests. In an unexpected twist, we have the question of whether Biden's Gaza policy is alienating black voters. President Biden's reluctance to call for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war is causing growing discontentment among black voters. Black Palestinian solidarity and a limited appetite for further U.S. involvement in the Middle East are contributing to this shift. The deaths of 3 black service members in a drone attack near the Syria-Jordan border have raised questions about Biden's Middle East policy and its impact on the black community. As the election season approaches, Biden will need to address these concerns if he wants to secure the black vote. Shifting our focus to Senegal, we see chaos after an election delay. Protests against the decision to postpone the presidential election have turned violent, with at least 3 people killed. West African leaders have called on Senegal to urgently restore the electoral calendar, but regional blocs like ECOWAS and the African Union have little leverage. The reputation of these organizations has been significantly damaged over their failure to deal with democratic backsliding. It's a challenging situation that requires strong leadership and regional cooperation. Finally, we have the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Palestinians have started evacuating the main hospital in Khan Yunis as the war continues to devastate the health sector. Less than half of Gaza's hospitals are functioning, and many have been targeted by Israeli airstrikes. The Israeli Finance Ministry's decision to block food deliveries to UNRWA has further exacerbated the situation. It's a dire humanitarian crisis that requires immediate attention and action. That's all the news for today, folks. Remember, these are complex issues that require thoughtful analysis and consideration. I encourage you to share your thoughts and questions. What are your ideas on these topics? Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.